So Abba Eban, who was Israel's foreign minister in the 60s during the Six Day War and after that, said that the Palestinians never failed to make a mistake. He's basically saying that whenever they had an opportunity to make a mistake, they made the mistake, or something to that nature. I believe the Jews, and I'm Jewish, and the Israelis, and I was born in Israel. I lived there until the age of 21. I went to UCLA and studied international relations, and then I studied law at Southwestern University, and I've been practicing law now for almost 40 years. So I believe the Jews and the Israelis made two major mistakes ever since Zionism started, almost in the last 200 years. And those mistakes perpetuate the Israeli Palestinian conflict. They put both the Israelis, the Jews, and the Palestinians in danger. And they created a trajectory, those mistakes created a trajectory that puts the Israelis and the Palestinians on a path to a continued conflict and violence, and they're not able to resolve it. So let's start with the first mistake. Theodor Herzl, at the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, he was the father of Zionism. I'm not going to go over the entire history, but he became convinced that Jews cannot stay in Europe, that anti-Semitism would continue forever in Europe, and it cannot be remedied, and therefore he came up with the idea that Jews should move to another country, create their own country, and create a safe haven. Um, he was right because there was a lot of anti Semitism in Europe, in Russia, Jews, and I'm talking way before the Holocaust, even before the Holocaust, not to mention the Holocaust, but before the Holocaust, there was a lot of anti Semitism in Russia and in Europe. Jews suffered substantially humiliation, beating, um, uh, anti Semitism all over the place. And it was quite spread in many communities in Russia and in Europe. There's no question about it. He, Herzl himself, was a very educated person. He was I believe he studied law, but he was a journalist for an Austrian newspaper. And the paper sent him over to Paris to cover the Dreyfus trial. Uh, Dreyfus was a Jewish officer that was put on trial by the French authorities uh, for betraying his country. And the Austrian newspaper sent Herzl from Austria to Paris to cover the trial. And he saw, when he was in Paris, Herzl saw a lot of people demonstrating against the Jews, blaming the Jews for not being loyal to their government, in this case, the um, French military and the French government. And so Herzl wrote about this trial, and that was the moment that he understood in his mind that anti Semitism is prevalent in Europe and in Russia. And he came up with the idea of a Jewish state, which is a country for Jews, where he believed Jews could live together and defend themselves, because they are not able to defend themselves in Russia and in Europe. Uh, so his remedy was to create a Jewish state. I personally believe that his uh, diagnosis was correct. In other words, there was substantial anti Semitism. But I think that his remedy to create a Jewish state or refuge for Jews was was a mistake. And because you don't run away from people that are anti Semites. By Herzl saying, we need to move to another country, or he actually did not move, he never moved. But by him recommending to the Jews that they would move is a major mistake. The Jews lived in Europe and Russia for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They spoke the language, they understood the culture, they had homes, they had businesses, they had a lot of connections. They were not really connected to any other country, not to Palestine, not to Israel or any other country. So for Herzl to say, oh, now you need to pack and you need to sell your homes and you need to move to another country, simply does not make sense. What you need to do, what he should have recommended, is to fight anti Semitism. See, by him recommending that the Jews move to another country, he accepted the idea that Jews are second class citizens in their own country. Because if they are equal, they should be treated equally and they should not be moving. So Herzl, by recommending that that the Jews need to satisfy the anti-Semites by moving away and making life more comfortable, talking about the anti-Semite, that Jews should fear the anti-Semites and move away. That was accepting the status of the Jews as second class citizens. That was accepting the idea that Jews cannot or should not be fighting for their equality, but make life uh, better for the anti Semites. It created a fear of other people that are not Jews. And that was a major mistake, because the idea of Zionism, the idea that Jews now need to live together to fight, and is the opposite of what needed to be done, which is to stay where they are, fight for equality, and not fear and not suspect those that are not Jews. Yeah, there were anti Semites, but you don't run away from them. You're not creating a perpetual fear of them. And by moving to another country, you're basically saying we need to be suspicious of the whole world because eventually we will be attacked by non-Jews. And that was the first error. The second error was, well, regarding the first error, is where are you going to move to? By moving, you're not really solved your problems. You're moving to another place where there are other people who live who are non-Jews as well. So the theory that Jews need to be together and have a safe haven could never materialize even under that rationale because you're moving to another place with other non-Jews. In his mind, perhaps he thought that, well, if we move to Palestine, or he was thinking about Argentina and Uganda, Jews would be in a better, will be superior to those that they are uh, replacing or that they're occupying. That was a mistake. That was a major mistake because what Herzl created is the theory of Zionism, and Zionism is a culture of fear. It's fear of other people forever. The state of Israel became a country that is constantly afraid of non Jews and constantly suspicious of non Jews and constantly on the or being prepared for a war with non Jews. That this could never end. By its own terminology, by its own formula, Israel will always be in a conflict because it doesn't trust anybody else. So this is why I'm not a Zionist because I believe that Zionism is a culture of fear. I don't believe that that's the correct culture. That's not the correct formula. It has negative effect on Israel itself and on Jews in other countries because it tells Jews in other countries, hey, we know you are going to be attacked one day and you need us as a refuge. So it the idea that Jews need to move away from where they are, starting with Herzl, really made the position of the Jews a lot weaker because it's the Jews themselves accepting the idea that they are not welcome and they are second class citizens and they need to move away. I am more of what Martin Luther King did, which is uh, we, meaning African Americans, we live here. We're not second class citizens. If there are anti Semites or anti or racist people, they are the one who need to change, not us. We did nothing wrong. We don't need to move to Africa to accommodate those that are racist. But Herzl did the exact opposite. Now, you may say, well, it was in those days, racism and anti Semitism was prevalent, and it was very hard to fight anti Semitism. I agree, it was probably very hard, but you do what's hard. You don't run away from what's hard. And what did they move to? They moved to Palestine, and that became even harder because Israel did not prove to be a safe haven. So the idea that Jews need to move away to Palestine doesn't give any safety to Jews. It's the opposite philosophy. The philosophy is that Jews are citizens of where they live, and they need to demand equality, and they do not need to fear other Jews. I'm sorry, other non-Jews. So that's why I think that Zionism is a culture of fear, and it creates um, a formula for Israel to be in conflict or potential conflict with its neighbors with forever. The second mistake that Israel made was when Israel was created. It created itself as a Jewish democracy. Uh, Democracy, the democracy is equality. Democracy cannot be Jewish, cannot be Muslim, it cannot be Christian. The whole purpose, the whole meaning of democracy is equality, regardless of religion. In other words, one of the reasons that democracy was created was to say we need to have a government that is not based on religion, a government that functions to serve and protect and give prosperity to all its citizens, regardless of their religion. So by saying we are a Jewish democracy, you do the exact opposite. You say we are the Jews, we are superior, and we are here to protect the Jews. So the second mistake of creating a Jewish democracy was direct result of the first mistake, which is accepting Zionism, which is basically a culture of fear and being afraid of everyone else. So when you're afraid of anyone else and you feel you're superior, you create a model that doesn't make sense, doesn't um, comply with accepted democratic principles, and that's a Jewish democracy where you say, well, we are allowed to pass religious laws, we are allowed to uh, interject religion into the government, and the moment you do that, it's a slippery slope, and that's what Israel is going through right now. So a Jewish democracy cannot sustain itself. Now, when you create a Jewish democracy, then what do? You cannot write a constitution. Why? Because in the constitution, everyone is equal. You can't write a constitution that says, well, only Jews are equal. It doesn't make sense. So Israel is not really a democracy. It doesn't have a constitution. It You see it right now. It doesn't allow the Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem uh, citizenship and the right to vote. Why? Because they are not Jews. So when you create this concept that doesn't make sense, and calling it a Jewish democracy, just because you use the word democracy doesn't mean it is democracy. You can have healthy cigarettes. If I say cigarettes are healthy, that's just me saying that. It's the opposite. It's contradictory. It's a contradictory term, healthy cigarettes. Jewish democracy is a contradictory term. And the reason Israel created the Jewish democracy is because of Zionism. So it doesn't have a constitution, it doesn't have a separation between religion and government. It doesn't have the everyone is not everyone is not treated equally. Palestinians are not allowed as citizens. They are not allowed to vote. So and Israel has other issues in terms of democracy that I think I had that in the previous video, and I'll have a video on that why Israel is not a democracy. But Israel is not, really not a democracy. A democracy is everyone is equal, constitution, it's separation between religion and government. So why do I say that? Is because I think that Israel is in a slippery slope, and something is going to happen. I'm not sure what. Now they're going to have an election in March, and they're not able to uh, bridge their differences. The differences, I don't believe, are related to Netanyahu exclusively. There is a real divide in Israel, and that is between what kind of country? Between religious, orthodox, and secular. They are not agreeing with each other on the nature of the country. And that makes perfectly sense when you call yourself a Jewish democracy. It's eventually going to get very difficult between these two groups, between the Orthodox and the secular. Orthodox want to have a Jewish country with Jewish laws and more observing Jewish custom. And seculars say, no, uh, we want to have public transportation. We want to um, have civil marriages. We don't want to be married by a rabbi. And we want to have businesses open on a Sabbath, etc. These two divides cannot, they're irreconcilable. And that's because of the creation of a Jewish state and a Jewish democracy. So, in my opinion, creating a Jewish democracy was a major error, a second major error. But I think there is a possibility to resolve and give peace. And by the way, the Jewish democracy never gave peace. It cannot give peace. By its nature, it's not. It cannot give peace because Zionism is constantly scared of other people and always prepares for an attack. So they never got rid of the fear that Herzl perpetuated when he started at the late 19th century. Fear is still there, just of different people. The idea is that, in my opinion, the solution is to engage, not to isolate. And Israel is moving more and more into isolation. And again, a big mistake. So what I think can be done is to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine together, a real democracy based on a constitution, based on three branches of government, um, the legislative, the uh, executive, and the judicial, for the entire people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza and Jerusalem. A government that would function alongside the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. Now, ideally, I would have liked to have what is called one state, one secular government for the people of Israel and Palestine, West Bank and Gaza, a democracy for everyone. That's ideal. But based on a constitution, based on one person, one vote, it really doesn't make a difference what's your religion or what's your nationality. One person, one vote would have been the best um, solution, would have been the most peaceful solution, and would have been the most um, democratic solution. But I don't think that it's possible now. Why? Because Israel has a very strong government, a Zionist government that is strong militarily, strong economically, and politically. And it gets a lot of support. Most Israelis, I'm talking about Israeli Jews, are Zionists. And so you cannot, in order to have one state, you need to have one government. Right now, we have three governments. We have the Israeli government that is very strong. We have the Hamas government that is also very strong in Gaza. And we have the Palestinian government in the West Bank that is not as strong militarily, but it has political power and also some economic power. So, in order to create a one state, one government, you need to dismantle those governments. How do you dismantle them? It's not possible. These governments have been, the Israeli government has been in existence since 1948. We are in 2021. So Israel is not going to dismantle its government. It's not going to allow anybody to attempt to dismantle its government. The same with Hamas government is not going to dismantle its own government. And the same with the PA, the Palestinian authorities. They are not going to dismantle. They are. Why would they dismantle? They are suspicious of each other. They were created because of the conflict, and they are strong economically, politically, and militarily. So they're not going to dismantle themselves. So the best situation right now, in my opinion, the best formula is to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine, side by side, the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. When I say side by side, I mean independent of those governments, separate from those governments, a government that would function by itself and would have the three branches of government that would be based on a constitution. And we have that constitution. You can read it at ipconfederation.org. And that government will lead the way into peace. That government would create the necessary engagement between Israelis and Palestinians, would remove the fear that Israelis have, and now Palestinians have the same thing, the fear of each other. That fear is the most dangerous aspect of their relations, because fear perpetuates suspicion, and suspicion perpetuates hostility, and the whole thing lasts forever. So a common government with Israelis and Palestinian parliament members based on a constitution, on secular democracy, on goals to make peace would be able to resolve the fear and the conflict and to create peace for the people of Israel and Palestine. But not only peace, and would give prosperity, and not only peace and prosperity, but would create a future vision for the people of Israel and Palestine together. And that's, making peace and giving prosperity is the tip of the iceberg. But future vision for the next many, many years is important. And that's really what it would do. So you could read about it at ipconfederation.org. So the parliament that I am thinking about and is would be 300 members, Israelis and Palestinians together, with 300 districts. Each district will um, uh, each district will elect its own parliament member. It could be Israeli or Palestinian. The district itself could be Israeli or Palestinian, or could be a mixed district. Doesn't really make a difference. Each district will elect one person. It could, again, either Israeli or Palestinian. And at the end of the day, 300 parliament members will be elected, and those 300 parliament members will vote. In order to pass legislation, you would need 55% of the Israeli and 55% of the Palestinian parliament members voting on legislation, and that would be then submitted to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments and give them a veto power. So the only legislation that the common government would be able to pass would be a reasonable legislation, because requires both the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. I'm sorry, the Israeli and the Palestinian parliament members to vote on it, and then you need to make sure that it's not going to be vetoed. We are simulating this on a regular basis. I believe our next simulation is on March 11th. Uh, you can sign up at ipconfederation.org and you'll see how it functions. So I want to thank you all for viewing this video, and also for sharing it would be appreciated. My name is Joseph Avasar, and my email, you can email me at josephavassar@gmail.com. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the simulations, hopefully. Bye bye.